The massive crystalline dome stretched impossibly high above the Galactic Council's judgment chamber. Its translucent walls pulsed with swirling patterns of light, each flash representing the collective thoughts of over 3,000 alien species from across the galaxy. At the center of this overwhelming spectacle stood a single figure that seemed impossibly small by comparison. Ambassador Lisa Kane, Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, stood motionless in the defendant's circle. The circular platform beneath her feet glowed with ancient symbols from civilizations that had ruled the stars before humanity had even discovered fire. Around her, towering above in their designated alcoves, sat the most powerful beings in known space. The Vorthak representatives resembled living mountains of black volcanic glass, their massive forms crackling with barely contained energy. When they spoke, their voices rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. The Mindari floated in shimmering containment fields, their ethereal bodies shifting between states of matter, while their thoughts manifested as swirling aurora patterns that painted the dome walls in impossible colors. The insectoid hive speakers clicked and chittered in perfect unison, their compound eyes reflecting Lisa's solitary figure thousands of times over, creating a dizzying kaleidoscope effect. Above them all sat Prime Adjudicator Korvac, his four-armed form draped in ceremonial robes that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. His species, the ancient Zelani, had ruled the galactic core for over 10,000 years. When he spoke, every being in the chamber fell silent. Ambassador Kane, his voice boomed through the acoustic amplifiers embedded in the dome's structure. You stand before this council accused of the gravest charges imaginable. Your species is charged with harboring weapons of mass destruction in violation of the Galactic Non-Proliferation Treaty. You are accused of conducting illegal genetic experiments that threaten the natural order of evolution itself. Most seriously, you stand accused of violating the sacred protocols of interstellar development by advancing your technology at an unnatural rate. The weight of accusation pressed down on Lisa from all sides. She could feel the hostile gazes of hundreds of alien species, each more advanced than humanity, each viewing her people as dangerous primitives who had somehow stumbled into technology they couldn't be trusted with. These are not minor infractions, Korvac continued, his secondary arms gesturing toward holographic displays that materialized throughout the chamber. The evidence suggests that humanity has developed weaponry capable of destroying entire star systems. Your genetic manipulation programs appear designed to create super soldiers that could threaten every peaceful species in the galaxy. Your technological advancement curve defies all known patterns of natural development. Lisa remained perfectly still throughout the recitation of charges, her expression calm and unreadable. She had trained for this moment for over 20 years, studying every species represented in the council, learning their weaknesses, their fears, their cultural blind spots. What the galaxy saw as humanity's greatest failing, their relative youth and apparent technological inferiority, was about to become their greatest strength. How does humanity answer these charges? Korvac demanded. For a long moment, Lisa said nothing. The silence stretched uncomfortably, broken only by the nervous chittering of the hive speakers and the low rumbling of confused Vorthak representatives. When she finally spoke, her voice carried clearly through the chamber's amplification system, reaching every corner of the vast space. Honorable Adjudicator, before I respond to these accusations, I must first ask a question that goes to the heart of this proceeding. She paused, letting her words sink in. In your collective wisdom, spanning millions of years of galactic civilization, has this council ever encountered a species that chose to leave rather than fight? A ripple of confusion passed through the chamber like a wave. The Mindari's aurora patterns flickered with uncertainty. Several hive speaker clusters stopped their rhythmic chittering mid-syllable. Even the mighty Vorthak shifted uncomfortably in their alcoves. This is not the time for philosophical discourse, Korvac growled, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. You will answer the charges brought against your species. Lisa's smile was small but unmistakable, and it seemed to unsettle even the most ancient council members. She had spent decades preparing for this moment, and everything was proceeding exactly as humanity had planned. Oh, but it is the time for philosophy, Your Honor, because in exactly 72 hours, every human being in this galaxy will depart, not as refugees fleeing persecution, not as prisoners being expelled, but by our own choice. And when we're gone, When every human voice falls silent and every human ship disappears beyond the galactic rim, you will finally understand the magnitude of your error. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates leaped from their alcoves, their universal translators struggling to keep pace with the cacophony of outraged voices speaking in hundreds of different languages. Warning alarms began to sound as some representatives became so agitated that their life support systems triggered emergency protocols. Through it all, Lisa stood motionless at the center of the storm, her smile never wavering. She could see the confusion in Korvac's ancient eyes, the fear beginning to creep into the Mindari's aurora patterns, the way the Hive speaker's perfect synchronization was starting to break down as uncertainty spread through their collective consciousness. You see, Lisa continued, her voice somehow cutting through the chaos without being raised. You've made the same mistake that every galactic civilization makes when they encounter something they don't understand. You assumed that because we're young, we're weak. Because we're small, we're insignificant. Because we're different, we're dangerous. Security forces began moving toward the defendant circle, but Lisa raised one hand in a gesture that somehow commanded attention. The movement was so confident, so precise, that it cut through the pandemonium like a blade. But you never asked the right questions. You never wondered why a species barely 2 centuries into spaceflight could develop technology that troubles civilizations millions of years old. You never questioned why our genetic manipulation programs produce results that your own scientists consider impossible. You never investigated how we achieve technological advancement that defies your models of natural development. The security forces had stopped moving. Every eye in the chamber was fixed on the lone, human figure standing calmly in the face of the galaxy's most powerful governing body. The answers to those questions would have terrified you far more than any weapon we might have built. Lisa's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but somehow every being in the vast chamber heard her clearly, because the truth is we're not the threat you think we are. We're something much worse, she paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the assembly like a shroud. We're the only thing that's been keeping the real threats at bay. As if summoned by her words, every communication system in the chamber began broadcasting the same signal simultaneously. Images flooded the holographic displays. Earth's surface was erupting with activity as massive structures rose from beneath the oceans, emerged from within mountain ranges, and lifted from hidden installations scattered across the planet's surface. These weren't ships in any conventional sense. They were structures that defied understanding, their hulls seeming to bend light around them, their propulsion systems leaving no energy signature that Council sensors could detect or analyze. As the assembled delegates watched in stunned silence, these impossible vessels began moving toward the galactic rim in perfect formation. Lisa's image began to waver as some kind of quantum displacement field activated around her. The countdown has already begun, she said, her voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions beyond the physical. In 72 hours, the last human will depart your galaxy. And then, honored adjudicator, you'll face the consequences of driving away the only species that was protecting you from what's coming. The transmission ended, leaving the most powerful governing body in the galaxy, staring at empty space and wondering what they had truly unleashed by challenging humanity's place among the stars. Admiral Theron Vex of the Council Enforcement Fleet stood rigid on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Vigilance, watching displays that showed readings his mind refused to accept. 48 hours had passed since Ambassador Kane's startling declaration, and the galaxy was witnessing something that challenged everything they thought they knew about humanity. Report, Vex commanded, his silver-scaled hands gripping the command rail so tightly that it creaked under the pressure. His species, the Kalari, had served as the Council's military arm for 3,000 years. They prided themselves on understanding every form of technology in the galaxy. What they were seeing now made a mockery of that understanding. Lieutenant Commander Naya, a young Zalani whose blue skin had turned pale with stress, stammered through her readings. Admiral, long-range sensors confirm it. Earth's entire population is moving. 11 billion humans all departing simultaneously. But sir, they're not fleeing to other systems within our galaxy. They're heading directly for the galactic rim, and their destination appears to be extragalactic space. Vex's reptilian features twisted with disbelief. Impossible. Our intelligence reports consistently showed that humanity's most advanced vessels were primitive fusion drive ships barely capable of faster-than-light travel. They're centuries behind even the most basic Council technology standards. How could they possibly survive in the void between galaxies? The main view screen displayed Earth hanging peaceful and blue against the star field, exactly as it had for the past 2 centuries, since humanity had joined the galactic community. But as they watched, massive geometric shapes began rising from the planet's surface with impossible grace. These weren't the crude metal ships the Council had observed during humanity's first contact. These were structures that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the eye could process, their surfaces reflecting light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Sir, these vessels," Naya whispered, consulting her instruments with trembling hands. "Their energy signatures don't match anything in our databases. The materials analysis is returning impossible readings. Some of these ships register as being larger than continents, yet they're moving with the precision of fighter craft. The physics involved shouldn't be possible." On the screen, ships the size of small moons emerged from beneath Earth's oceans with no visible propulsion systems. They rose through the atmosphere without creating so much as a ripple in the air around them. More vessels erupted from within mountain ranges, emerging from what had appeared to be solid rock as if the stone itself was merely an illusion. Hidden installations across the planet's surface opened like flowers blooming, revealing technology that made the Council's greatest achievements look like primitive tools. "Communications. Are we receiving any transmissions from the human fleet?" Vex demanded. "Yes, sir, we're getting a wideband transmission from their lead vessel. It's Ambassador Kane again. But Admiral..." The communications officer paused, his voice uncertain. "She's no longer wearing diplomatic attire." Kane's image appeared on the main display, but the woman addressing them bore little resemblance to the composed diplomat who had stood before the Council just 2 days earlier. She wore a form-fitting uniform of deep black material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The garment was adorned with insignia that the universal translators couldn't interpret, symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. "Council fleet?" Kane's voice carried an authority that made every officer on the bridge stand straighter. "You are witnessing what we call the Great Departure. For 200 years since our first contact with galactic civilization, we have maintained a carefully constructed facade. We allowed you to believe in your technological superiority while we studied, learned, and prepared." Admiral Vex felt his blood turn to ice as the implications of her words struck him. She's saying they've been planning this for centuries. Every human colony you permitted us to establish was actually a strategically positioned staging ground. Every trade agreement, every cultural exchange program, every diplomatic mission was an intelligence-gathering operation. Every human scientist working in Council research facilities was collecting data. Every human artist performing in your cultural centers was mapping your social structures. Every human trader conducting business was analyzing your economic vulnerabilities. The massive human ships continued their exodus, moving in perfect formation toward the edge of known space. Their propulsion systems left no detectable energy signatures, no gravitational disturbances, no traces that Council sensors could analyze. It was as if they were simply willing themselves through space. "Admiral," the sensor operator called out, his voice cracking with strain, "I'm detecting massive power fluctuations at the galactic rim. Something is responding to their approach." Kane's image smiled, and the expression was far from reassuring. "You wanted to judge us based on your understanding of what humanity should be capable of achieving. But you never understood what we actually are. Every human you thought was a refugee fleeing Earth's problems was actually an advanced scout preparing for this moment. Every human student learning in your universities was gathering intelligence on your greatest weaknesses. Every human diplomat sitting in your councils was mapping your political fractures. The formations of departing human ships began to accelerate beyond anything Council technology could match. They moved not through space but around it, bending reality to accommodate their passage in ways that violated fundamental laws of physics. We maintained this deception not out of fear, but out of mercy," Kane continued, her image beginning to flicker with interference patterns that suggested quantum-level communication systems. "Because if you had known what humanity truly is, what we're truly capable of, you would have tried to destroy us, and that attempt would have doomed not just your species, but every living thing in this galaxy." Admiral Vex gripped his command station as readings flooded in from across the galaxy. Every major human settlement, every minor outpost, every single human presence was departing simultaneously. They moved with coordination that suggested a level of planning and communication that spanned centuries. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Naya reported, her voice barely steady. "We're receiving reports from across the galaxy. Human populations everywhere are departing, not just from major colonies, but from stations we didn't even know they occupied. They're emerging from asteroid mining operations we never authorized, from deep space installations our sensors never detected, from hidden facilities and star systems we thought were uninhabited. The scope of humanity's deception was becoming clear. For 2 centuries, while pretending to be junior members of galactic civilization, they had been building a secret infrastructure that spanned the entire galaxy. Every human presence had been part of a vast network preparing for this exact moment. You see, Admiral Vex, Kane said, and Vex realized with a chill that she was addressing him directly. We know about your military assessments of human capabilities. We know about the contingency plans your government developed to contain us if we ever became a threat. We know about the weapon systems you've positioned throughout human space, and the surveillance networks monitoring our activities." Kane paused, her expression becoming something that might have been pity. "What you don't know is that every one of those weapons has been compromised for decades. Every surveillance system has been feeding you exactly the information we wanted you to have. Every assessment of human capabilities has been carefully crafted to make you underestimate us, while giving you just enough concern to justify your fears." The human fleet reached the galactic rim, and space itself seemed to part before them like water. They passed beyond the edge of known space and into the void between galaxies, their forms fading from sensors as they entered regions where no council ship had ever ventured. "You wanted to judge humanity." Kane's final transmission came through clearly despite the impossible distance. "But you never understood that we were already your judges. And our verdict, delivered through our departure, is that this galaxy is not ready for the truth of what we are." The communication ended, leaving the Council's greatest military force staring at empty space where moments before had been the most extensive intelligence network in galactic history. Admiral Vex found himself commanding a fleet protecting a galaxy that had just lost something they were only beginning to understand they had never really controlled in the first place. As the last human ship vanished beyond detection range, alarms began sounding throughout the fleet. Deep space monitoring stations were reporting massive energy signatures approaching from beyond the galactic edge. Something vast and hostile was moving through the void between galaxies, heading directly toward them. The humans had departed in silence, but they had left behind a galaxy about to discover why their protection had been necessary. Dr. Vera Caney, chief xenoarchaeologist of the Galactic Council, sprinted through the ancient archives beneath Nexus Prime with an urgency that made her assistants struggle to keep pace. The vast underground chambers stretched for kilometers in every direction, filled with the accumulated knowledge of 20 million years of galactic civilization. Stone tablets carved by species that had gone extinct before the current council members' ancestors had evolved, crystallized data cores containing the compressed memories of entire civilizations, and preserved neural recordings from beings whose very existence challenged current understanding of life itself. "Here," she gasped, pointing toward a section of the archives that bore warning symbols in dozens of dead languages. Massive vault doors sealed with technology from 7 different extinct civilizations blocked their path. The Forbidden Histories Archive. If Ambassador Kane was telling the truth about humanity protecting us, the answers have to be in here. Her Catherian assistant, Dr. Jorik, extended his tentacles toward the ancient locking mechanisms with obvious reluctance. His pale blue skin had taken on a sickly gray tinge since the emergency alert had reached them an hour earlier. "Dr. Kane, these records are sealed by direct council decree. The access codes were lost 3,000 years ago when the last keeper of these vaults chose death rather than reveal their contents." "Then break the seals," Vera snapped, her normally patient demeanor cracking under the weight of mounting crisis. "The Council gave me unlimited authorization. Something is approaching from beyond our galaxy, and if the humans were telling the truth, these records might be our only hope of understanding what we're facing." As Jorik's advanced biomanipulation abilities worked to dissolve the ancient security systems, Vera's mind raced through the implications of everything they had witnessed. Humanity's departure hadn't just been a mass exodus. It had been a revelation that challenged every assumption the galaxy had made about power, technology, and the nature of civilization itself. The vault doors groaned as seals that had remained unbroken for millennia finally gave way. Inside the chamber was vast beyond imagination, its walls lined with storage systems that incorporated technology from dozens of extinct species. Holographic projections flickered to life automatically as they entered, displaying images and data from civilizations that had ruled the galaxy long before any current species had achieved space travel. Access granted to sealed historical archives, announced an automated voice, speaking in a language that predated known galactic civilization by millions of years. The universal translators struggled with concepts that had no modern equivalents. Warning: contents classified beyond current threat assessment parameters. Viewing authorization restricted to extinction-level emergency protocols. Vera moved toward the central archive station, her hands trembling as she activated systems that had remained dormant for eons. Show me everything related to extragalactic threats. All records dealing with entities or forces originating from beyond our galaxy. The holographic displays filled the chamber with images that made Vera's breath catch in her throat. She saw civilizations that dwarfed anything in current galactic space. Beings whose technology appeared to manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself. Entire galactic arms had been reshaped by powers that seemed to view star systems the way current species viewed individual atoms. The Devourers, the ancient archive system announced, its voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions beyond the audible spectrum. Entity classification: extragalactic apex predators. Threat assessment: complete galactic extinction. Last recorded incursion: 50,000 standard years ago. The holographic record showed the arrival of entities that defied description. They weren't ships or beings in any conventional sense, but rather manifestations of hunger itself, consuming not just matter and energy, but the very concepts that held reality together. Star systems didn't just die when the Devourers passed through them. They ceased to have ever existed, erased from the timeline itself. How were they stopped? Jorik whispered. His tentacles coiled tightly around his torso in a defensive posture, his species adopted when facing existential terror. Defeat achieved through deployment of Guardian Network. The archive continued. Guardian species designation classified. Operational designation: the Watchers. Tactical assessment. Guardian species demonstrated reality manipulation capabilities exceeding all known technological paradigms. Strategic assessment. Guardians departed galaxy immediately following successful Devourer repulsion. Current status unknown. Warning: Guardian species power levels exceeded safe parameters for coexistence with developing civilizations. Vera's mind struggled to process the implications. Show me physical characteristics of the Guardian species. Any available data. The holographic display shifted, showing figures in advanced environmental suits that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. When one of the helmets was removed in the ancient recording, Vera felt her legs nearly give out beneath her. The face was unmistakably human. Impossible. She breathed. Humans didn't achieve spaceflight until 2 centuries ago. This recording is 50,000 years old. Cross-referencing Guardian species' technological capabilities with recent intelligence reports, the archive system announced. Its processing algorithms working through datasets that spanned geological ages. Match probability: 97.4%. Conclusion: species currently designated as humanity represents return of Guardian entities to galactic space. Jorik's skin had gone completely gray with shock. Are you saying that humans are the same species that protected the galaxy 50,000 years ago? Before Vera could respond, emergency alarms began blaring throughout the archive chamber. Jorik's communication implant crackled with an urgent transmission from the Council's deep space monitoring network. All stations, priority alert level maximum. Long-range sensors detecting massive extragalactic energy signatures approaching from coordinates beyond charted space. Multiple entities, each larger than stellar formations. Estimated time to galactic rim contact: 14 hours. Repeat: unknown entities of unprecedented scale approaching galaxy. Energy signatures match theoretical models for reality manipulation technology. This is not a drill. Vera stared at the ancient holographic records as the pieces of an impossible puzzle fell into place. The humans hadn't been newcomers to galactic civilization. They had been its original protectors, maintaining a vigil that had lasted 50 millennia. Their primitive appearance, their technological limitations, their political insignificance had all been an elaborate disguise designed to hide the most powerful force the galaxy had ever known. The Guardian departure protocols, she whispered, accessing deeper layers of the archive system. Show me why they left the first time. New images filled the chamber, showing the aftermath of the Devourer War. The Guardian species, having demonstrated power that could reshape reality itself, had faced a choice. They could remain in the galaxy as its rulers, using their godlike abilities to impose order and peace, or they could depart, allowing the galaxy's younger species to develop naturally without being overshadowed by beings whose very presence warped the normal evolution of civilization. They had chosen exile, disappearing into the void between galaxies to prevent their own power from corrupting the galactic community they had saved. But they maintained watch, Vera realized, her voice filled with growing horror. They've been out there for 50,000 years, making sure the Devourers didn't return. And we just drove them away. The archive system's final revelation hit like a physical blow. Guardian species departure from galactic space results in immediate cessation of reality stabilization protocols. Devourer entities, previously contained by Guardian presence, will resume expansion activities. Estimated galactic extinction timeline without Guardian protection, 72 hours maximum. As if summoned by her words, the emergency broadcast from across the galaxy began reporting the same impossible readings. Reality itself was starting to break down at the galactic rim as something vast and hungry approached from the darkness between stars. The humans had departed in silence, taking with them the only force capable of protecting a galaxy that had been too proud to understand what it was losing. And now, with less than 3 days remaining before total extinction, the Galactic Council faced the consequences of judging beings whose power they had never even suspected. In the ancient archives beneath Nexus Prime, surrounded by the preserved wisdom of extinct civilizations, Vera Caney began the desperate task of finding a way to contact entities who might no longer have any reason to answer their call for help. The galaxy's greatest mistake was about to exact its final price, and she was running out of time to find a solution that might not even exist. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos unlike anything witnessed in the institution's 10,000-year history. Representatives who had never shown fear in the face of stellar wars and civilization-ending disasters now huddled together in their alcoves, their usual territorial boundaries forgotten in the face of approaching annihilation. Prime Adjudicator Korvac stood at the center of the crystalline chamber, his forearms gesturing frantically at the massive holographic display dominating the space above them. The display showed the galactic rim, where hundreds of void-black entities crept inexorably inward like a cancer spreading through space itself. Each entity measured larger than entire star systems, their forms seeming to exist in more dimensions than mortal minds could process. "Current status report," Korvac commanded, his voice barely maintaining its usual authority. Fleet Admiral Vex, his silver scales dulled with exhaustion from 18 hours of desperate tactical planning, stepped forward with readings that grew worse by the hour. The Devourer entities continue their approach at a velocity that exceeds our theoretical maximum for faster-than-light travel. Current trajectory analysis indicates they will reach the outer colonial systems in 11 hours. Our combined fleets, representing the military might of 3,000 civilized worlds, will not even slow their advance. Council member Torva of the Vorthak hegemony, her massive obsidian form crackling with barely contained energy fields, spoke the thought that haunted every mind in the chamber. "We need the humans back. The archaeological evidence is undeniable. They are our only hope for survival. But how do we contact them?" demanded Hive Speaker Prime Nexus, her collective consciousness causing her entire delegation to vibrate with shared anxiety. "They have departed our galaxy entirely. Our fastest vessels would require standard months to reach even the closest point where they might have gone, assuming we could navigate the void between galaxies at all." Dr. Vera Caney stepped forward from the observer's gallery, her pale face marked by exhaustion from hours spent in the forbidden archives. "The ancient Guardian protocols mention quantum entanglement communication networks spanning galactic distances. If humans truly are the returned Guardian species, they will be monitoring specific frequencies for exactly this type of emergency." Korvac's ancient eyes fixed on her with desperate hope. "What resources do you require?" Access to the Nexus Prime Quantum Communication Array. The Deep Space Research Installation is powerful enough to transmit messages beyond our galaxy's edge, but the power requirements would drain half the planet's energy grid for a single transmission. And there's no guarantee they will respond to our plea. Authorize it, Korvac commanded without hesitation. What message should we transmit? Before Vera could formulate a response, the air in the center of the chamber began to shimmer with quantum disturbance patterns. A familiar holographic image materialized, but the projection was grainy and distorted by the immense distances involved. Ambassador Kane appeared before them, but her appearance had changed once again. Gone was even the advanced uniform she had worn during the Exodus. Now she stood in what appeared to be a vast command center that stretched beyond the hologram's visual limits. The technology visible behind her defied every known principle of engineering. Structures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously supported equipment that appeared to manipulate reality at the quantum level. Council of the Milky Way Galaxy. Kane's voice carried across impossible distances with perfect clarity. We have been monitoring your situation with interest. The Devourer entities have indeed responded to our departure exactly as we calculated they would. They have been waiting beyond the galactic edge for 50,000 years, held in check only by our presence. The chamber fell into absolute silence except for the quantum static of long-distance communication. You see, Kane continued, her image stabilizing as whatever impossible technology facilitated this communication adjusted itself. The Devourers exist primarily as hunger incarnate. They feed not just on matter and energy, but on the concepts that hold reality together. Order, causality, the mathematical principles that prevent chaos from consuming existence itself. They can sense Guardian presence across intergalactic distances, and they fear us. Admiral Vex found his voice first, though it cracked with strain. Then you deliberately led them to us by departing. You've condemned 11 trillion sentient beings to extinction, simply to prove a point about our judgment of your species. Kane's expression remained perfectly calm, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. Admiral, you still fail to understand the fundamental nature of what is happening here. We did not lead the Devourers to you. We have been preventing them from reaching you for longer than your civilization has existed. The holographic display shifted, showing vast fleets of impossible human vessels positioned in the void between galaxies. They moved in formations that seemed to extend across multiple dimensions, their numbers stretching beyond the ability to count. For 50,000 years, we have maintained a barrier between your galaxy and the entities that would consume it. We have fought wars in dimensions you cannot perceive against enemies whose very existence is antithetical to life itself. We have sacrificed entire generations of our species to maintain a vigil you never knew existed. Council member Torva's energy fields flared with realization. You're saying that humanity has been protecting us this entire time, even while allowing us to treat them as inferior primitives. The disguise was necessary, Kane replied, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in the quantum substrate of reality itself. Our true nature is incompatible with normal galactic civilization. We exist partially outside conventional space-time. Our technology operates by rewriting the fundamental laws that govern reality. Our presence in your galaxy, if known, would have prevented every species here from developing naturally. The implications struck the assembled delegates like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just been hiding their capabilities. They had been deliberately limiting themselves to prevent their very existence from stunting the growth of galactic civilization. But when you chose to judge us, Kane continued, when you decided that our capabilities made us too dangerous to coexist with your society, you forced us to reveal our true nature. The Devourers sensed that revelation immediately. The quantum-transmitted image began to flicker with interference patterns that suggested massive energy expenditures in whatever location Kane occupied. They are not approaching your galaxy to feed. They are approaching because they believe the Guardian presence has been permanently eliminated. What you are witnessing is not an invasion. It is a test. Prime Adjudicator Korvac managed to speak despite his growing horror at the situation's implications. A test of what? Kane's smile held no warmth. A test of whether this galaxy contains anything worth the Devourer's attention. If they determine that you pose no threat, they will simply consume everything and move on. But if they detect any trace of power that might eventually challenge them, they will ensure that such potential is permanently eliminated. The transmission began to fade, but Kane's final words cut through the static with perfect clarity. You wanted to judge humanity based on your fear of what we might become. Now you will be judged by entities whose standards make ours seem gentle by comparison. We suggest you prepare accordingly. The hologram vanished, leaving the Galactic Council, staring at empty space while the most powerful, extinction-level threat in known existence approached, their galaxy with the intention of determining whether their entire civilization deserved to continue existing. In the growing silence, every delegate faced the same terrible realization. They had not just driven away their protectors. They had triggered an evaluation by entities whose judgment would be far less merciful than anything humanity had ever contemplated. The galaxy's fate now rested in the hands of beings whose mercy they had already exhausted through their own fear and pride. At the edge of known space, reality itself began to scream. Admiral Vex watched from the bridge of his flagship as the fundamental laws of physics warped around the approaching Devourer fleet. Space-time twisted into impossible geometries. Stars flickered in and out of existence, and the very concept of distance became meaningless in the presence of entities that existed primarily as manifestations of entropy itself. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "We're receiving reports from across the fleet. Reality distortions are affecting our navigation systems. Some ships are reporting that they exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Others claim that time is flowing backward in their engine compartments." The Devourers had reached the galactic rim, and their mere presence was beginning to unravel the basic principles that held the universe together. Each entity resembled a void in space that seemed to devour light, matter, and meaning itself. When they moved, they left trails of nothingness that hurt to perceive, wounds in reality that might never heal. Then, without warning, space began to fold. Human vessels materialized not from hyperspace or dimensional transit, but from what appeared to be a fundamental rewriting of local reality. These ships bore no resemblance to anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. They existed in geometries that challenged perception, their hulls seeming to extend into dimensions that mortal minds couldn't process. When they moved, they didn't travel through space so much as convince space to rearrange itself around them. The lead vessel dwarfed even the largest Devourer entity. When it transmitted, the communication didn't come through conventional channels, but seemed to resonate directly in the quantum substrate of reality itself, reaching every consciousness in the galaxy simultaneously. "This is Commander Marcus Reed, Guardian Prime of the Human Protectorate. Devourer entities, you have violated the compact of the Void by approaching inhabited galactic space. You will withdraw immediately to your designated containment zone, or face complete erasure from all possible timelines." The response came as a psychic emanation that drove lesser minds to unconsciousness across 3 star systems. The Devourers had not just rejected the ultimatum, they had expressed something that might have been contempt for the beings they had once feared. What followed redefined every concept the galaxy held about the nature of power and warfare. Human vessels didn't attack in any conventional sense. They simply decided that the laws of reality would function differently in their immediate vicinity. Where their weapons fired, they weren't launching projectiles or energy beams. They were imposing their will upon the fundamental forces that held existence together, rewriting the mathematical principles that governed space, time, and causality itself. The first Devourer entity to die didn't explode or collapse. It simply ceased to have ever existed. The empty space where it had been smoothed over as if reality was healing from a wound. The stars that had been obscured by its presence reappeared, and the distortions it had created in space-time unraveled as if they had never occurred. Dr. Vera Caney watched from the Nexus Prime Observatory, her instruments recording readings that challenged every principle of known science. "They're not just using advanced technology," she whispered to her assistants. "They're manipulating the underlying code of reality itself. They're editing the universe's operating system in real time." The battle, if it could be called that, lasted less than 10 minutes. Human vessels moved through space by willing reality to accommodate their presence. Their defensive systems didn't deflect attacks. They simply declared that such attacks had never been attempted. When devourer entities tried to consume the mathematical principles that maintained local space-time, human ships responded by reinforcing those principles with something that could only be described as applied philosophy. Within moments, the threat that had haunted the galactic edge for 50 millennia was erased so completely that only the human forces remembered it had ever existed. The space they had occupied was returned to its natural state, and the very concept of their presence was edited out of the historical record. As the last echoes of the impossible battle faded, Commander Reed's image appeared throughout the galaxy, reaching every inhabited world simultaneously through methods that bypassed all known communication technology. Galactic Council, you have witnessed the true nature of Guardian capabilities. For 50,000 years we have maintained containment protocols for entities whose very existence threatens the stability of reality itself. We have fought wars, in dimensions that your mathematics cannot describe, against enemies whose nature is antithetical to the continued existence of consciousness. Behind Reed, the human fleet arranged itself in formations that seemed to extend across multiple universes simultaneously. Each vessel represented power that could reshape entire galactic arms according to the will of its operators. You judged us based on your perception that we were dangerous to galactic civilization. In this assessment, you were more accurate than you understood. We are dangerous. We represent a level of power that naturally leads to the corruption of any society that wields it. We have seen this corruption destroy entire galaxies. We have watched civilizations that mastered reality manipulation become worse than the entities they originally fought against. Ambassador Kane's image appeared beside Reed's, her expression carrying the weight of 50,000 years of isolation and sacrifice. This is why Guardian species choose exile, not as punishment for the civilizations we protect, but as protection for them. Power like ours doesn't coexist with normal society. It corrupts it. It transforms it. Eventually, it destroys everything that made that society worth protecting in the first place. Prime Adjudicator Korvac found his voice, though it was barely steady enough to frame the question that haunted every mind in the galaxy. Will you remain? Will you help us rebuild our defenses against future threats? Kane's expression carried infinite sadness. No, honored Adjudicator. The Council made its judgment of humanity, and judgments create consequences that cannot be easily reversed. Your decision to evaluate our species as a threat to galactic stability was based on incomplete information, but it was not entirely wrong. The human fleet began to fade from all sensors as reality reasserted its normal parameters around their departure. We return now to our vigil in the void between galaxies where we belong. The devourer threat has been permanently eliminated, but there are other entities in the cosmic dark that require our attention. We will continue to maintain the barriers between your galaxy and forces that would destroy it, not because you deserve our protection, but because protection is what we have chosen to be. Reed's final transmission carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in the quantum foundations of space itself. The next time this galaxy faces extinction from forces beyond your ability to comprehend, we will come. But remember this day when you are tempted to judge species whose nature you do not understand. Remember that some protectors must remain monsters to keep worse monsters at bay. As the last human vessel vanished beyond the galactic rim, the Council found itself governing a galaxy forever changed. They had learned that their greatest threat had also been their most devoted guardian, and that true strength sometimes required choosing exile over recognition, sacrifice over reward. In the archives of Nexus Prime, Dr. Vera Caney completed her final entry on the incident. Let the record show that humanity departed in silence, carrying with them not just the anger of our judgment, but our ignorance of the burdens they bore for our protection. We are alone now in ways we never understood we were not alone before. Yet we survive. And perhaps that mercy is the greatest gift that Guardians can give to those too proud to understand the protection they provide. The galaxy continued its ancient rotation through space, forever watched by shadows that had once called it home, protected by beings who had chosen eternal exile, rather than allow their power to corrupt the civilizations they had sworn to defend. In the cosmic dark beyond the rim, humanity maintained its vigil against threats that the galaxy would never know existed. asking for nothing in return except the knowledge that life and consciousness would continue to flourish in the space they had chosen to leave behind.